Pitched it inside the 20 and the 10, and look at that, he hurdles his way into the...
Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 10 of Shanalytics. I'm here with my guy, So Real Sunil. We're both writers now at all 49ers Sports Illustrated, which, listen, this has been a great week for me in general. I just got over 150 subs on my YouTube channel.
Wow.
I just got introduced to the team with Grant, so I'm going to be writing at least once a week with all 49ers SI. But Sunil, how you doing, my man? I saw you on the stream last night. You've been writing, of course. I've been reading all your stuff you've been putting out there. But how you doing for the people, man?
Man, the people, I love. Everything's good, man. I'm excited to be on this stage with you. I think you're one of the rising stars, man. I said, one of the best looking writers that we have the nicest hair by far. So, I'm excited to be able to talk some 49ers with you tonight.
Yeah, and for everybody at home, I'm usually wearing my full suit. I'm getting everything dry clean right now, so it's a hoodie for today. I hope you all can give me
Casualytics.
That. Oh yeah,
Casualytics today.
Casualytics today. But just for everybody, Sunil's information is all down below in the YouTube description. I got your YouTube channel with Men on the Internet podcast and your Twitter link down below, so everybody can go check that out.
Love it.
But Sunil, why don't we just get into the breaking news of the hour, or the last few hours, I should say, with Jordan Willis. It's announced, I believe, by Adam Schefter that he's going to be suspended for the first 6 games of the season with the 49ers. How do you think that's going to impact this team? What were some of your initial thoughts when you heard that?
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's always tough to see, somebody get popped by, for taking performing-enhancing drugs, allegedly, obviously. I think it will affect a little bit of the depth that the defensive line has. I think Jordan Willis, like Samson Ebukam, were some of the speed rushers that I think the defensive line was really going to utilize to keep those mobile quarterbacks in the box, because I think that's been the biggest Achilles heel for the 49ers. And Jordan Willis, in the time that he played last season, showed some signs of, being a productive player. So it is a hit, but I think the first 6 games are, non-paid games. So I believe they'd be able to, maybe sign somebody to be able to take over that role if they keep Willis on the team, or if they just cut him because of, of this infraction. So, it's tough to see, but I don't think it's going to be so detrimental. He was more of a rotation piece than somebody we were building around.
And I think more than anything, when I heard this news, I didn't think of Jordan Willis and his impact on the 49ers. I thought of the guys who were going to be the big beneficiaries because of this. I think, guys like Arden Key, right? Zach Kerr, 2 guys who I think could get a lot more playtime now that there's going to be one less guy in their rotation potentially ahead of them or in that same sort of spot. So I think those are 2 guys I'm looking out for to really make a bigger impact than I was expecting. But just like you said, going back to it, it's only the first 6 weeks of the season. If the 49ers are going to hang on to Jordan Willis, which we'll see, they could cut him. I think, the team would work itself out. But I kind of look at this in an optimistic view, in the sense that the 49ers do cut him, then that means I think they're addressing a need on the team, which is that edge rusher opposite side of Nick Bosa, something they just haven't been able to address this offseason. So I think if it forces them to go and say, hey, we need to get another defensive end, then this could be a good thing for the team, because I still feel like they have some spots along their depth chart where they could certainly use more players.
Yeah, and like I said, I think it's early enough, and it was, the type of player that wasn't somebody like a centerpiece. So, if it was going to happen to somebody, we hate to see it happen to anybody, but, you got to reap with the decisions you make,
Exactly. And I still think there's a chance he could be on this team come week 7 or week 8, given his age and the fact that the 49ers did trade for him.
Right.
So, do I look?
He'll be fresh. He'll be fresh.
Yeah, hey, and with the 49ers, we certainly know that can be a problem with this team. So
Right.
I don't think it's the worst thing in the world for this team. I just wonder how they'll react to it, and I'll be interested to see kind of how they go moving forward.
Right.
But we don't have to spend all the time talking about this because that was a short piece of breaking news for the first time in what felt like weeks since those injuries came
Right.
out. So it was good to get something fresh from the 49ers from a content perspective.
Sure.
But the next thing I did want to ask you about was George Kittle, I believe, went on Good Morning Football. It made the specific comment that he feels like Trey Lance could be special in this offense, and that what he sees from him is that he's more of a risk taker. He's willing to throw the ball into small windows, and he's just trying to throw it as hard as he can, is what he said. So is there anything that you take away from that initially?
So, I mean, it's kind of hard to take anything away from a George Kittle interview just because he's the biggest cheerleader for his teammates. You'll never hear anything negative come out of his mouth. And obviously, Trey Lance is the first overall pick. He's going to do everything he can to boost his confidence. And, I don't think he's lying. I mean, I'm sure all of that is true. If anybody that follows the 49ers are seeing all of this footage of Trey Lance practicing and, his motion looks good and, he's actually putting in the work, which is, great to see. So as far as any takeaways, I mean, I think it's everything that we expected. He has a really strong arm. He's going to be able to take some chances that maybe Jimmy G wasn't able to take because he doesn't have either the confidence in his arm or just the capability of making some of the throws that Trey Lance can make. And I think it's going to be just we're going to be able to see, a different side or more open options in offense, especially with, Kyle Shanahan being the offensive genius that he is, to be able to have somebody that could throw the ball down the field, that will take those chances, that does have that strength to make certain throws. I think it's going to just be fun to watch, and it's going to be something that defenses really have to pay attention to with Trey Lance whenever he does get in there.
And I guess the one thing, if anything, that I really did take away from these comments from George Kittle is that George Kittle was willing to move on to Trey Lance. I mean, he didn't come out and say, hey, Trey's our guy. He's our starter. Why isn't he playing? But he did show a certain amount of confidence in him that, given George Kittle's position as Jimmy Garoppolo's number one cheerleader, I thought was pretty interesting because I feel like all the stuff we see from George, especially when he's talking about his teammates, it's all about praising Jimmy G, defending. Why are people all over him? Why do people say all this stuff about Jimmy? But for the first time, you really see him talking about our new quarterback. You can see how excited he is to play in this new offense. And I think going back to something you said is that playing outside the numbers is going to be a lot easier for this team with Trey Lance and that offense because he can do it. I think, the outside the numbers pass catcher people think of on this team is Brandon Ayuk. But just when I looked at Brandon Ayuk's deep balls from this past year, he had 3 catches over 20-plus yards, right? None of those were outside the numbers. So even when we do have all these options, right, at wide receiver, at pass catcher, we're not able to take advantage of them with the Jimmy offense. So I think what George is, I don't know if he's trying to do this, but he's certainly putting a decent amount of pressure on Jimmy Garoppolo to be that much better than Trey Lance right now, because there are things that Trey Lance can do that Jimmy just can't and won't ever be able to do.
Or hasn't done, right? So obviously we have footage on Jimmy G, and we've seen what he's capable of and what he struggles at. Trey Lance is the shiny new toy that we haven't really seen out there. So, everybody's excited about it. I wouldn't read too much into it because I just think Kittle is super just excitable, and you ask him about any player and he's going to come out with just the most gushing praise for him, especially on the team, being the type of teammate that he is. But I think that everybody just kind of knows the writing's on the wall. You don't trade 2 first-round picks and don't expect this to be the quarterback of the immediate future, whether that's game 1, who knows? But, we do know it's happening sooner than later just because of all the assets they put in to move up.
And that's the thing with this move eventually to Trey Lance is I personally, I think it's got to be sooner rather than later. But I feel like the last step of Trey Lance finally being the 49ers starter is this team and this coaching staff buying into the fact that Trey's the starter. Because I mean, certainly the fans have almost already bought into that idea. You see all the stuff with Jesse, what he was saying the other day. People are just getting fired up about that, right? But when you see, I think when you see Jimmy Garoppolo's biggest defender make these kind of comments, it does leave an impression on me that this team is willing to move on and that they understand that this is a business more than anything. You know, they're not just going to stick with the guy that's got them there because he's got them there. They understand how this football business works, the fact that if you aren't cutting it, you're not going to play. And with Jimmy, I mean, yeah, you can say when he was healthy, he was cutting it. I would disagree with that. But even if you do think he was cutting it, like he doesn't even play that much, so you can't say that he's very reliable in that sense. So I just think this team is going to have to make the transition from one to the other at some point.
And I think that I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but I think that Lance is a really likable guy, you know, and we've obviously seen Kittle got to spend some time with them in Vegas, and you know, I'm sure, you know, we saw what we saw, but I'm sure there's a lot of conversations that are happening behind the scenes. And from everything we've seen in the interviews that we've seen of Trey Lance, he just seems like a guy that you want to root for. He seems like a guy that you know, is a great teammate. And then now we're seeing just the work ethic that he puts in, all the praise that the coaching staff has given. You know, it's really exciting to see you know, somebody be the first pick or our first round draft pick that we've traded so many assets for, to be somebody that everybody's really excited about. And, you know, no negative stories are coming out, which is great to see.
No, and I think the other cool thing too is we've already seen him this offseason work with multiple 49ers receivers. So he's certainly going out of his way to make those connections with his teammate. I mean, I know people see the little silly Instagram workouts, but I think it does say something that even while he's going to his guy, Quincy Avery, right, his quarterback coach, he's still bringing a 49ers player with him, or at least one is coming there with him so that he can understand the offense a little better and play in Shanahan's offense at a really high level. I think the way you're going to do that is by getting a lot of experience with guys who know that offense already. And this is an idea I'll float out to you real quick because I want to end this topic on this. Do you think it would have been more beneficiary for Nick Mullins to be the starter or backup for Trey Lance rather than Jimmy Garoppolo?
I mean, that's hard to say because we don't know what Nick Mullins looks like after the injury, right? So he's coming off of a pretty, you know, serious. I don't know if it ended up being his elbow or his shoulder, but
I believe it was his elbow.
Yeah. So, and obviously it wasn't as bad as it initially looked. However, he's still an injured quarterback, so I don't know if that is maybe in looking at it for Trey Lance. It might be better just because, you know, obviously there's less competition for the starter. But I think this is great because it's going to either whomever's the week one starter, it's going to be the best option because these two are going to push each other to bring the best football out of either one of these quarterbacks. So, you know, I think this is a good situation for both of them in the immediate future, just because, you know, that is what we have right now. You know, shoulda, coulda, wouldas. You know, it's great to talk about, but right now this is what we have. And another point in bringing all those receivers is he's already starting to build that chemistry, which is going to be extremely important for playing. We all know, you know, the stories of like Peyton Manning and Tom Brady, how their chemistry is with their receivers to already build that timing and, you know, that foundation, that friendship, I think is going to be key. Trey Lance is approaching this like he's going to be the week one starter, which is great to see out of, you know, the rookie.
I think it's an excellent attitude to have. And just going back to what I was saying a minute ago, I think the only thing where I even think Nick Mullins would be more of a beneficiary is that he understands the offense better than Jimmy does. I think we've heard all the stories about how cerebral Nick was with this offense. So I think that's just where things could have gotten interesting. But like you said, it's shoulda, coulda, woulda. We didn't know exactly what kind of situation we would be in at this point of the season. So it's hard to go back retroactively and say, oh, we could have done this and this, right? So, you know,
I just think the 49ers didn't want another injury-prone quarterback on the roster. We already have Jimmy G, and everybody else are quarterbacks that haven't really had any injury history, which is good. Much different from the quarterback room in the past. So
definitely. And that kind of leads me to the next thing I want to talk about. We touched a little bit on it before, but we were talking about people who are really going to benefit from Trey Lance in this new offense that the 49ers are going to be running. So who do you think could be the two biggest beneficiaries from the switch to Jimmy to Trey?
Yeah, and I think you already mentioned one. Obviously, the easiest one to name is Brandon Ayuk. Being a deep threat. Obviously he does well with the slants and the short game and the yak and all that kind of stuff. But I think that ability to use his speed to open up the offense, I think, is going to be key, and we're going to be able to see once Lance gets in there. Ayuk going deep and being able to catch some deep outs and all those types of roles. It just opens up the playbook. And that leads me to my second person, which I think is going to be Kyle Shanahan. Because whenever you think about some of the interviews that Shanahan had said in the past, it was always about like the type of weapon he wanted was, he said somebody that could run like Lamar and, throw like Drew Brees, right? So I think there's levels to Kyle Shanahan's playbook that haven't been opened up that he just couldn't utilize because he didn't have the quarterback with the arm strength to do the things or the mobility to do the things that Lance could do. So I think Kyle Shanahan, we're going to see a different layer that Kyle Shanahan could delve into, which is going to make him even look more like a genius when he's able to, drop these new schemes and the ability to put Trey in positions to really show him succeed.
Yeah, and I think what's going to be really great about this transition for Kyle is it allows him to open up his offense so much more, like you're saying. If you look at what he was doing in Atlanta in the passing game specifically and what he does with the 49ers, it almost seems like a watered down worse version, right? And it's because of the quarterback they have in place. It's because they can't run those same plays that they were running with Matt Ryan for Jimmy Garoppolo. So when you add that element of Trey Lance, who's just an athletic freak who will be able to make plays outside of the pocket, bootleg, moving with the ball in his hands, doing all these kinds of different things. I think you're right. Brandon Ayuk is going to be one of the biggest beneficiaries of this new Trey Lance offense. I don't think there's anyone who's going to disagree with that. But the one way I'm going to go different with this, and I thought of Kyle too. I'll admit that was one of the people I had on my short list. I'm going to go with a group on this team, which is the offensive line. Mm-hmm. I think the offensive line's job is just going to be a lot easier when Trey Lance is able to go under center for a couple of reasons. For one, they're going to be running the ball even more with Trey Lance. I think this team enjoys running the ball. The offensive linemen, of course, enjoy running the ball, but you saw so many times with this team last year in 2020 when they were forced to be put in pass protection over and over and over. It psychologically affects an offensive line, and especially when the team struggles so much like they did last season. So I think with that, with that Trey Lance offense, Trey Lance is going to be moving outside the pocket. He's going to be able to do different things with the ball in his hands. He's going to be able to make plays after they're not even there. He's going to be able to do all this extra stuff that Jimmy Garoppolo couldn't even dream of doing. So, hell yeah, I think the offensive line is going to be a huge beneficiary. It's because it's just going to make their job simpler and easier. And I think the offensive linemen are going to enjoy this offense with Trey Lance in particular way more than they would enjoy just a Jimmy Garoppolo offense.
Yeah, and just to piggyback off that, my close third place was the running game, because I think that, being able to have a credible quarterback that you're worried about their arm as well as their legs gives us that weapon that like Seattle has, that Arizona has with Kyle Murray, obviously Seattle with Russell Wilson. So now we have it with Trey as far as somebody that you have to worry about what they can do just running the ball as well as throwing the ball, which is going to make hold that extra defender in spy, or make them not just commit to the run just because they don't know what's going to happen with the quarterback with the ball in their hands. So I think that's going to be another group that's going to benefit a lot, is just the running game overall, with Trey actually being somebody that's going to run the ball as well.
Right. And I think the funny thing is that going into this offseason, people had this idea that, Kyle Shanahan lost to Patrick Mahomes and he was watching on the sideline as he's slinging the ball. All Kyle is going to want to do now is going to throw the ball even more. And I said, no, I think Kyle showed his hand in this draft. He wants to run the ball even more. So I think, and I won on this point with Rob Shue and with Grant even the other day, is that Trey is coming from a run-first offense at North Dakota State. He's not going to be uncomfortable with the 49ers throwing the ball 9 times in the NFC Championship game. Now, that's how I don't think that's how things will happen next time.
Right.
They are going to make it that far. But the point being is that Kyle and Trey, I feel like, are kind of the perfect marriage for each other, where Kyle can learn to maybe get more outside of his comfort zone with a guy he can trust who can do so much on the ground. But then with Trey, he's going to have a play caller, an offensive mind who's catering everything to his skill set and already naturally caters everything to his skill set so well.
Totally agree with you, man. And anytime you could win an argument with Rob or with Grant, you get a thumbs up in my book, my friend.
Yeah, just one more interesting thing, and I think I mentioned this on a few streams before, so for anyone watching at home, it might not be new, but the 49ers in 2019 ran the ball 51% of the time. In 2012, the Washington football team ran the ball 51% of the time. If you look at those Ravens from 2 years ago, the same year the 49ers went to the Super Bowl, they ran the ball 55% of the time. So the 49ers are right in that neighborhood of where they should be in terms of the most runs in the league. So I think, that number might stay at 51. It might go up a few notches even with Trey behind center. But the point being is that Trey will be set up for success with this offense. I think that's the biggest key.
Sure. And I was one of the biggest guys in the draft saying that they were going to actually pick another running back in the first 3 rounds because I know how important the run game is to a Shanahan offense. And, they went in and they got Trey Sermon, which I think is going to play a huge role in the offense this season. With Mostert there, with Gallman there, I think they have, and Hasty's, showing some strides as well. So I think they're going to have a pretty solid run game. Obviously, they took the 2 offensive linemen, one being Aaron Banks, who we all think is going to be a starter week 1. Yeah. So, yeah, I agree with you. The run game is still going to be the most prevalent, and then that's just going to open up more lanes for Trey to, go deep on play action and things like that.
And you know what? That kind of does lead me perfectly to the next topic and we'll go back to Trey in a second. And I am switching up the order on you a little bit here.
Oh, good, man.
But I want to talk about this in specific because you were talking about the running back room. And when I brought this up to you, I think out of all the position groups that I'm looking at for the 49ers, I think the one position group that I think is one of the 3 deepest is the running back room. And in fact, I think it's the deepest Kyle's had in his entire time here with the 49ers.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people sleep on Gallman. I actually kind of know him pretty well because he was on a few of my fantasy teams last season. I was able to pick him up mid-season when he started going off and won me some money. So I got to see the type of production he was putting up in New York with he's
a serious back.
Yeah.
I mean, he can really run.
And he didn't have much, obviously the Giants aren't this powerhouse offense. So for him to be able to put up the numbers that he put up and in that type of offense shows what he's capable of. And I think that he's going to be asked to do less. And that's going to help him to even produce even more. So I agree with you. I think the running back room is extremely strong. I think Trey Sermon, and we've seen, rookies come in and be really productive from week 1 and in their first, few years. It's not out of this world to think that a rookie could just come in and be the starter and play really, really well. And then we still have the secret weapon in Mostert with his big playability, and having 2 solid options that could take the bulk of the carries is only going to enhance his ability to break free, stay fresh, and just have those home run type runs that he's known for, and those short screens that go for 40, 50, 60-yard touchdowns. So I think that's going to be one of the biggest strengths, is just that rotation of people staying healthy. And knock on wood, it doesn't happen, but if anybody goes down, Hasty could come in and pick up some carries as well. So I think they're really good. They're really well positioned in the running back room as well.
Yeah, and I think something that goes to show you that is I think the 49ers at some point would have to consider dropping a guy like Hasty, right? But I think even when you think about that, you're like, that's a guy another team would pick right up immediately. So that just tells me that this is one of the deepest positions on the 49ers, is that I think if you look comparatively across the NFL, there aren't many running back groups that are this deep and have this many skill sets and this many guys who can do all kinds of different things. So I think for Kyle, it's going to be really exciting in that aspect because his beauty is the run game, right? That is his baby. So when you have all these guys like Sermon, who's going to add a different element to this team of where that they didn't have these last few years, to where he can really be a punisher for this team at the end of the games. He doesn't have to break off the 20-yard runs like Mostert does, right? He can just hit teams over and over with 5-yard run after 5-yard run after 6-yard run after 7-yard run, right? To the point where at the end of games, you could really win with that style of football, which is something we know the 49ers were missing even in 2019. So I think when you take all that into consideration, this is definitely, I think, Kyle's deepest running back room. But overall, I think this might be the deepest position group on the entire team. So
yeah, I'm with you on that as well.
And for you, Sunil, what are 2 other position groups that you're looking at who you think are the deepest of the deep for the 49ers?
Yeah, so the 3 that I was going to say, obviously running backs we just discussed. My second one was going to be defensive line. Just with all the depth that they have there and just the rotations that they're able to pick with their ability to just bring back all the players that they did bring back. And then my third group was actually going to be the quarterback room. And the reason for that is I think they have 2 starters now, which one of the starters is taking them to the Super Bowl. The other starter is the up-and-coming rookie who I believe can have a very strong rookie season as well. And then, whomever is behind them, whether it's Sudfeld or Rosen, I think as the third quarterback is much better than, what we've had in the past, whether it was Beathard or Mullins or whatnot. It's another, player. I'm thinking it's going to be Rosen, another, cerebral type player that has a lot of ability to be accurate with the ball, throw deep. And I think that quarterback room is an upgrade from previous quarterback rooms, and I think is very deep and can keep us afloat even if the top guy goes down. Hopefully it doesn't happen, but it's happened in the past for the 49ers. Right. But even if the QB1 goes down, I think we still have a great QB2 and a QB3 option in that room as well.
So I did consider quarterback. I think that's one of the positions I had the hardest time keeping off this list, if I'm being honest. Because first, the position I went for was offensive line. When I was coming up with this topic, the position I thought about in particular was the offensive line, because I think when you look at offensive lines all across the league, they've diminished greatly over the last 5 to 10 years. So I think when you take all that into consideration, you look at what the 49ers have, their own starting 5 offensive linemen, along with all the guys that they have off the bench. I think this is one of the deepest offensive lines in the entire NFL. Now, do I think it's one of the 5 best? No, I think it's probably one of the 5 to 10 best, but that doesn't mean that they don't have good players behind them like Daniel Brunskill, right, who can come in and do these kinds of things for them in different positions. So I think with that, the 49ers, like if they were going to have 1 or 2 of their offensive linemen go down, they would probably be okay. Now, I don't think it would be great, but I think they would be able to survive better than most teams would. So that's kind of why I wanted to go that way in particular.
Yeah, and I don't think that's a bad option as well. I think they made a concerted effort on both the offensive and defensive lines this offseason to make sure there's a lot of depth there, knowing how important that is to both, the offensive line is the heartbeat of their offense, the defensive line is the heartbeat of their defense. So having depth there means that they could continue to play, in even if there's injuries in those positions.
So I didn't go with defensive line for my other position. I think especially after the suspension today, that's kind of what would draw me off that. And quite frankly, I don't think the 49ers defensive line is as deep as some people think it is this year. But that might just be me personally. I think that the position people should be talking about more is linebacker. I mean, it seems like all across this room for the 49ers, they have different kinds of options. Now, you don't have as many or linebackers in general as you do with other positions on the team. But for the spots the 49ers have to fill and the guys they have behind them, if you look up and down, it's probably one of the deeper positions in the entire team. So I think you look at Fred.
Who do you like outside of Greenlaw and Warner, obviously?
So Al-Shahir, I think, is the next guy.
Right.
So, I don't think it's a particular deep group, but I think if you're looking at but if I'm being fair, I think if you look at the other position groups for the 49ers, wide receiver, outside of those 2 guys, I don't think they're particularly deep. I don't think they're that deep in secondary this year. I just told you why I don't think they're as deep in the defensive line. So I think quarterback probably should have been the position I would have put here instead. But even then, I feel like for what the 49ers are asking of their linebackers and how many guys they have to use, they have a really good group for what they're trying to accomplish.
And I think, depth I think a lot of times, when people talk about depth, they're talking about maybe known quantities. I think that the 49ers are actually deep at every position because they have like quality rookies. The problem is we don't know what they're capable of. So automatically people go for the worst, right? They're not going to be able to come in. But they're like, if Emmanuel Moseley goes down or Verrett goes down, who do we have after them? Well, Emmanuel Moseley was an undrafted rookie. And he's now the starter that everybody's like, if he goes down, we have no other options, right? And the two rookies that we have starting behind them were both drafted. One, obviously, Ambry in the third round, and then Lenore in the fifth round. And I think if this draft class wasn't as deep as it was, Lenore would actually be a higher round draft pick. And if he played last season, which he was, out the whole season, he would be a much higher pick as well. So I'm not as worried about all the depth in the secondary that people are saying, a lot of 49er fans. It's just the unknown quantities. And for some reason, 49er fans are super pessimistic. So they think that if it's a rookie, that he's going to just go out and, not play well. I, on the other hand, am a supreme optimist. So I believe that all these rookies, if they need to step up, are going to step up. And I'm also believing that D Ford's coming back, which is why I think that makes them a really deep line as well.
Oh my gosh. Wow. You are really quite the optimist. I got to tell you, that's where I'm going to disagree with you hard. I think what they're doing with corner is complacent at best. I don't think you can expect to take a corner outside of the top 40 picks and have any expectations for them, let alone year one expectations. So do I think a guy like Ambry Thomas could play down the line for the 49ers? Yeah, but I don't want him to. In my opinion, I think every team should be trying to have as many good corners as possible. I don't think you can ever have too many good corners on your team. So I think if you look at what the team has done with Jason Verrett, re-signing him, I think that's a smart move. You get him back on a one-year deal, right? But then if you look at the 49ers cornerback room beyond this year, it's really scary quick. It means next year, Emmanuel Moseley is cornerback one on this team. And if even if you're able to re-sign Jason Verrett, who knows what will happen with him at any point in his career. He's shown his injury history before. So I'm not confident with the team, where the team is at with corner right now, because I think if anything were to happen at corner, it would be dire for the same. I really believe if Jason Verrett were to go down, it would just be season over. Don't even think about
it. Which backups did we have last year that you were more excited about than the backups we have this year?
Well,
exactly. So these are the things that people don't realize. It's like they talk about, are you more excited about Ambry Thomas than you were about what's his name that was thrown or Kittle Witherspoon or whatever the case may be? Like, obviously we didn't and we were not bad as a secondary last year, and I think we upgraded our backups versus we brought back all our starters and then upgraded the backups. So I don't understand how people are looking at the secondary saying we got worse there when they can't name the backup that we had last year that they were super excited about, that we're like, dang, why didn't we re-sign him? There's nobody that you wanted that we had last year that we don't have this year.
No, I think that's fair to point out that they've improved, but at the same time, I still think this is a bottom 5 corner room in the entire NFL. I don't.
Yikes.
I think when you take injury into consideration, hell yeah, because guess what? If you look at all the starting 3 corners who are on this team for this year, none of them played 16 games last year, so you can't expect that from them. And then with all of Jason Verrett's injury history, we'd be lucky to get a full season out of him in my mind. If we do get anything from him, I think it's gravy.
But who else is betting that he's going to have a full healthy season this year? Him. He only signed a 1-year deal. He wasn't pushing for that long-term contract either. So he understands if he doesn't stay healthy, he's not going to get a big contract next season either. So all of these guys are on, 1-year deals, betting on themselves to stay healthy. And then on top of that, a lot of cornerbacks are in the last year of their deal or on 1-year deals. So next year is going to be ripe for the pickings as far as corners.
Man,
again,
isn't that what the 49ers say almost every offseason? It's like, oh, we'll get corner down the line. We'll get corner next year. I mean, I remember in last year's draft, people were frustrated afterwards, and they're like, oh, they'll figure it out next season when they took a guy with the 102nd pick. Like, I just don't think
they figured it out. I think Ambry Thomas is going to be really, really good, man. And once again, people are not realizing how this draft was so different from other drafts.
No, you know what? You're right in this aspect because I think and I kind of, you know what, you go for this because I was just
gonna say Ambry missed all last season because he held out, right? Yeah. But if he played, he would have been either a first or second round pick. So we got just depth. We got steals as far as with Ambry, with Lenore, who I think wouldn't have been, much higher, maybe like a third or a fourth round that we picked up in the fifth, but Ambry definitely would have been a first or a second round pick playing in the Big Ten. All eyes on him with the type of production that he was already playing with all that. And another thing is he played a lot of games in college, even though he missed the whole year. He started all 3 years he did play and was healthy. So I think that's another great quality in a cornerback. He's mean. He loves playing physical, and especially with the receivers that we have to go against in the NFC West, I think he's prime. And to be able to sit behind a Verrett and a Mosley, I think he's going to learn a lot. And if he does have to play, I think he's going to jump in and play really well.
Oh, you see that's where you pushed a little too far over the line for me, Sunil.
But you've not seen anything to think otherwise. It's just you feeling like he's not going to be able to do it. It's not because you've seen him be exposed or anything like that. It's just, like I said, it's just the pessimism because you've never seen him. You think the worst instead of thinking, dang, he could be a steal just like Mosley was. Nobody thought Mosley was going to be a starter. He was an undrafted rookie, and he ended up being a starter immediately when he started playing.
I just think with corner in particular, especially in the last 5 years, teams just haven't had any success outside the top 40 picks at that position.
Well, one of our starters is Emmanuel Mosley, and he wasn't even drafted.
I know you're right. You're right in that sense, but I just don't. Oh gosh, I really struggle.
It's okay. I'll give you a hug. We'll walk you through this. But once you see Ambry out there balling, just remember this conversation.
Oh, now you see, this isn't how I see things going down. I think one of those, honestly, no, if I'm being honest right now, I think one of those two starters at some point is going to get hurt, and I think it could just completely derail the season for this team. I try and be an optimist, Sunil, but I really think that's probably the weakest position on this team.
And it could be because what's great about what we ask our corners to do is
that's fair.
Our defense. That's why it's so good that our defensive line is as strong as it is. Because if we are making sure opposing quarterbacks don't have a lot of time, that just makes it easier for our corners to be able to, to defend. So that we don't need to have shut down corners. We don't need a Revis Island. We don't need, all these type of guys. We just need people that could be competent and not, make huge mistakes, because we have really great safeties that could make up for any mistakes that corners do. And we have really good defensive line that could, hide weaknesses. And then I think we have one of the best linebacking cores as well. And a linebacker in Fred Warner that can also cover. So we have I just feel like people are thinking we need the best cornerback room, which we don't. We have really top defensive line, really top receiving linebackers, really top secondary safeties. Of course, one of our layers is not going to be the strongest because we have 3 of the 4 that are probably top 5.
Absolutely. And this is a pure philosophical thing with the 49ers. I think it's intentional that their corner room isn't the best of the best. Now, would they maybe like to have the best of the best? Of course. But like you said, you have to divvy out your money and your resources in a certain way. But I am going to agree with my guy Harvey here. If Verrett goes down, you have to admit, Sunil, things get very scary.
I'm Team Ambry, man. Ambry Thomas will come in and be all right.
Oh, you're putting a lot of faith. As much faith as Grant puts in Rostwell, you're putting it in Ambry Thomas right
Absolutely,
now.
Absolutely, I am. Ambry, if you're watching this, I'm your biggest fan, my man.
Ambry, I got nothing against you, my man. I have my questions. That's all. So Neil, I'm glad we talked about that, though, because I think that's something where a lot of 49ers fans probably all feel the same way. And this, from most of the people I've talked to, none of them have said what you said, which is, don't worry about the cornerback room. So it's honestly refreshing to hear.
I think if you look, obviously Croc does great breakdowns. If you look at his breakdown of Ambry Thomas, it's really good. And if you look at his first 3 years, if he had came out last year and in the draft, he would have been one of the top rated corners. There was just a really deep corner class this year, and he didn't play all last year, which is why he dropped to the 3rd round. But he's much better than where he's drafted. So 49er fans, don't be too sad.
Well, and I think the other thing with that pick too, and just this draft overall, is that there are going to be so many unknowns. This is the hardest draft to evaluate, if any draft class, because there are so many factors that you don't have to put into a normal year, right? So I think in that sense, a lot of teams could get gems in the 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th round, even with undrafted free agents. So if the 49ers could be one of those teams, great. I'd love it. I'm just saying I don't think it's going to happen that way. We'll
find out, man. We'll find out.
We'll find out. It's the beauty of the season, right?
Yep.
The next, I do want to talk about Trey Lance one more time before we get out of here, though, because I think, and this is interesting with Trey in particular. Do you think he's ready to compete for the starting job yet? Not take the starting job, but do you think he's ready for a quarterback competition?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, this is all straight conjecture because he also is somebody who didn't play all last season. But just as far as work ethic, as far as raw skills, as far as draft capital spent and what he's going to be asked to do in this offense, I absolutely think that he could come in and, contend for a starting job. Think about it. You mentioned it earlier. In the NFC Championship game, our starting quarterback only had to throw the ball 8 times and complete 6 of them. So in that case, anybody could really contend for a starting job if that's what you're going to be asked to do. And the 49ers are always one of the lowest bottom 3 when it comes to attempts per game by their quarterback. So they're not going to be asking for Trey to come out and throw the ball a bunch of times. So just off of ability, youth, energy, all this kind of stuff, he's definitely going to push Jimmy for that starting job. Whether he wins it or not is obviously going to be what happens in camp. But as far as just able to contend, for sure.
Yeah, and I think that's the exciting thing that I saw from Kyle Shanahan's recent comments is that he's not just going to sit Trey on the bench to sit him, right? He's not going to give him the Patrick Mahomes treatment, the Aaron Rodgers treatment, just to do it. So when I hear things like that, I'm like, hell yeah, Trey can compete for the starting job because Kyle's leaving that window open. Now, he's openly said that Jimmy is our starter, right? He's our starter for now. But in terms of competing for that starting job, Trey Lance should be getting as many first-team reps in practice as makes sense, right? It gets to a certain point because Jimmy Garoppolo is your starting quarterback. You don't want to throw him off his rhythm. You want him to be able to compete and work on his own, but at the same time, you want to see where Trey is. And the most important thing for me with Trey is that he hasn't played football in a while. And even when he did play football, he didn't throw the ball a heck of a lot. So I want to get him as many good attempts as possible in this offense. And that's where I kind of go to things in preseason. I think if in preseason, Trey Lance is clearly ready to be a starting quarterback for the 49ers, and we hear rumblings that Jimmy isn't doing so well in practice or things are going a certain way, I think they could make the switch from Jimmy to Trey at some point in the middle of the preseason. So listen, is Trey ready to compete for the starting job? Yeah, he is. But it's just a matter of how this team is going to make things happen. Because on the one hand, I don't think they're putting pressure on Trey by having Jimmy there, right? You're not forcing him to play that first year. You're not saying, oh, we need this and that from you. We need it all right now, right? They're telling Trey that we'll wait, and when you're ready, that's when you'll play. And I think if you're a 49ers fan, so it's got to be the most exciting thing because you look at other teams like just the Miami Dolphins, right? The Tua Tagovailoa situation last year, it seemed like a PR thing, right? Or someone in the front office or in ownership seemed to want him to play. And then when he finally did play, the head coach yanked him out for Ryan Fitzpatrick. So that would be a worst case scenario for Trey Lance, right? If he goes in and he's out and he's in and he's out and he's in and he's out, that would be bad for Trey. Right. But if it's clear that Trey is competitive with Jimmy in the passing drills, competitive in 11-on-11s with those types of things in practice, the team should definitely consider moving on to Trey as soon as possible, because guess what? If you're able to get rid of Jimmy Garoppolo, the sooner the better with him.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't think we're going to hear anything negative about Jimmy G. And I also think we should be taking all the Jimmy G's news with a grain of salt, knowing that from this point on, it's all about getting the most capital you can for Jimmy G. Kyle Shanahan, you will never hear anything negative out of his mouth about Jimmy G. Lynch will never say anything negative. No reporters will get any stories about Jimmy G not practicing well and all this kind of stuff, because at this point, it's all about keeping Jimmy G in the eyes of the NFL, a reliable starter, a great starter for when, one of these starting quarterbacks goes down on a team that is contending to go out, make that move to bring in Jimmy G as a starter. And the 49ers could get, hopefully a first or a second out of it, if they play their cards right.
That's the thing. I think people have had this idea with Jimmy, they're going to trade him for this and that. I don't think our first or a second could even come for Jimmy. But
if there's a team that needs him right now, there's no need, then it's hard to say. But if a team like Washington is contending for a playoff spot, you don't think that if their starting quarterback, if Fitzpatrick goes down, they're not going to try to make a move to make sure that they could stay in contention, or Miami?
I think with Jimmy's contract, that's the part where things get really hard, right? I think
but longer in the season, the contract becomes easier to eat. So, we're not talking about week 1. We're talking about, week 4, week 5. And, when contracts over there, you can renegotiate, all that kind of stuff. So we've seen it in the past, man. We've seen worse contracts be traded and so on and so forth. So,
but I also think I feel like the two scenarios where Jimmy gets traded is, one, if Trey somehow beats him out before the season and another team starter goes down and a team desperately needs a guy like Jimmy. Let's say the Denver Broncos. That's just a random example. But if a team like them or the Houston Texans or someone like this has their starter go down, they're like, hey, listen, we need a guy, and Jimmy is a guy. So I feel like they could get in a sort of Sam Bradford situation, right? Where the Eagles were a few years ago when they drafted Carson Wentz, to where I believe it was the Vikings starter, Teddy Bridgewater, right? Who went down with that horrific knee injury. They were able to swoop in at the right moment and get him off their books. That would be the most important thing to me, because with Jimmy specifically, with his contract, if you're able to get it off the books for this year and you don't use that money, it rolls over to next year. So let's say the salary cap is supposed to be $200 million, right? If the team trades Jimmy before week 1, they're able to take $25 million and add that to their salary cap for next year. So I think the team certainly has options with Jimmy. They have outs, like you said. It could be a mid-season thing. I think the thing I'm eyeing is something like the trade deadline, because that could be a point in the season where the team is comfortable enough with what they've seen in Trey, right? Or he could even have played a game or two at that point to where the team is ready to move on to Trey and ready to hand the keys over to him. So in terms of going back to our original question of if Trey can compete for the starting job right now, I think he can. But I think at the same time, if he's not ready, that's okay. That's the beauty of this, right? Is that the 49ers have the option of, if Trey isn't ready to play yet, we can put in Jimmy, because Jimmy, even though I have all my own reservations about him, I have my own issues with Jimmy, the team certainly believes in Jimmy. And that's something really important. I think that's the only time where I could see Trey fully being the starter for this team. I think the last part of this for Trey is going to be the guys in practice, right, buying into the fact that he is their starting quarterback rather than Jimmy Garoppolo. So if Trey can prove that in practice, then yeah, I think it's awesome, because on top of all that, Jimmy should look better than Trey should in practice, because Trey isn't going to be using his running ability, right? He's not going to be using his athleticism like he would in a normal game, where he's going to be even better for this team, right? So if anything, Jimmy Garoppolo should be the quote unquote, good practice player, even though we know he isn't a good practice player. So that's where I think things get really interesting. If it's even close, right, in passing drills, in training camp, in the preseason, if things are getting tighter and tighter for this team, and it's only a matter of a little small difference between the two, this team should really consider starting him, and I think starting him week 1. Like this, I know it's something that people, when we drafted him, were like, oh, they're going to sit Trey. He's not going to play for a while, this and that. I don't buy that. I think if a guy is ready, you should play him. I just don't subscribe to this notion that you have to sit Patrick Mahomes just to sit Patrick Mahomes. Like, I'm just going to give a wild guess. If Patrick Mahomes played his rookie year, I think he would still be okay. So that's kind of what I get back to with this thing is like, if you have a young guy on a rookie wage scale contract, that's the most valuable thing in the NFL. So the amount of time he's sitting on the bench is just time you're wasting with that contract. Now, the 49ers do certainly have time to, I wouldn't say waste, but they can wait on him, right? But at the same time, if you want to be able to cash in on that value of why teams go after rookie quarterbacks, why teams with good rosters go after rookie quarterbacks, you need to have Jimmy moved off your books. So you're going to have to make that move to Trey, I think, as soon as possible.
I'm with you. I'm with you.
Yeah, and you know what? That kind of does take us to the last topic. I just want to check the comments really quick, what Harvey is saying. Okay, yeah, he's saying 27 mil is what the 49ers are wasting. I totally agree with that. I mean, I wrote all about this on All 49ers SI. If anyone hasn't checked that out yet, it's all about Trey Lance's contract and specifically how and Grant went over this idea perfectly like in the last few days. He's really put it great that you can't expect this team to win with a quarterback making 13.5% of the salary cap. Now, no team has ever won with a rookie quarterback, but I certainly think the odds are better with Trey rather than the odds with Jimmy, because you're afforded so much more cap space and you can make a move to where, let's say if you think you're a Super Bowl contender, you can go sign Melvin Ingram. You can go trade for Stephon Gilmore. You can go get another offensive lineman if one of your guys goes down. So you're not left with options. You have even more options when you're able to offload Jimmy Garoppolo from your salary cap.
Yeah, I'm not too worried about the salary cap because we got Parag and he figures out ways to fit everybody in it. So I'm done worrying about how much salary cap space we have, because we thought we had issues this offseason, and for some reason we got everybody we wanted plus more. So
and that's the thing where I do get I get really worked up about the salary cap. But even if you look at the New Orleans Saints, they were supposed to be screwed this offseason, right? But then they went and franchise tagged their safety anyways. So for any team out there, they can jump through hoops. They can do all kinds of things to where if they want a guy on their team, they can make it happen.
And if there's ever going to be a year where a quarterback could win the Super Bowl making such a high percentage, it would be this year when it's a weird salary cap. It dropped because of, COVID last year. And then it's going to pick back up next year. So I think that, those numbers are great, but this is a very different year. So I think all of those former stats that we use, like it's never been done, like all that kind of stuff, this year is going to be one of those years where a lot of never been dones are going to be done just because of, how everything laid out after COVID.
Well, I think just with the percentage of the salary cap, I think that probably is going to have a big factor. I still think that there will be a certain factor to where the only quarterbacks who have ever even done that statistic, right, the one that everyone brings up all the time with the percentage, is Steve Young and Tom Brady. So even when you're at that high of a percentage, you have to be the best of the best to even accomplish that. So that's kind of where I get to the point where I just don't think Jimmy Garoppolo is going to be able to beat the odds. That's where I do have reservations. I think that's a fair reservation scenario.
Well, I think Trey Lance is going to beat the odds.
I do. I
think with Jimmy G on the as the backup.
Oh gosh, that's a great waste of $27 million on your bench. I think cheerleaders are a lot less costly usually, but if that's what Jimmy's going to be, I guess that's what he's going to be this year. The last thing I wanted to ask you about, Sunil, and we kind of talked about corner a lot, but one of the latest things to come around, with any news recently, because there's not much news right now, is that CBS reported that Stephon Gilmore is available for trade and that he wants to be traded, and that one of the teams who could be trading for him is the San Francisco 49ers. So when you hear that, Sunil, what do you think?
So I don't know how long you've been following me, but I was probably the first person back before we even traded up for quarterback, all this kind of stuff. I said trade Jimmy G for Stephon Gilmore straight up. And I was bringing that up way back, and people were killing me for it. Why would you go after Stephon Gilmore? And I brought up, hey, he's in the last year of his contract. He's actually in a very he's only making like I think it was like 12-15 million this year, maybe even less, but it was rarely comparative for like a QB a CB1. He wasn't making like ridiculous money for it, and at that time Bill Belichick didn't have his quarterback solution. Cam wasn't signed. They didn't, obviously the draft, they didn't know what was going to happen. So I was thinking, they were excited about Jimmy G. Trade straight up for Stephon Gilmore because I thought him and Verrett would be an unstoppable combo at corner. But now that we're looking at it this deep in, the only way we're going to be able to do that is getting rid of Jimmy G, right? And so now it's like, is Jimmy G more valuable than Stephon Gilmore? That's the real question. And also, obviously, we'd have to give up a second-round pick, which means we have no first or second next year. Which
you see, I think that's where people get a little too optimistic. I don't think if you look at the history, and I was just looking at recent corners who have been traded, I don't think it's going to be quite a second-round pick. I think that's the best the Patriots could get. But if you look just last year, for example, Darius Slay was traded for a third-round pick and a fifth-round pick. So I don't think the 49ers will have to give up a second for him. But like you're saying, you still have to give up a decent amount of draft capital. And with all the draft capital this team has given up this offseason, it's going to be even more, right? So
and I'm not against it. I think it's actually a great – if they could get him for a third or get him for a third and a fifth, I think it's really good because now it gives us – we could have Verrett and Gilmore play side by side. Obviously, with the receivers that we have to deal with in the NFC West, having two shutdown corners will be amazing because it seems like every receiving core that we're going against has two bona fide starters at receiver. And then, both of them are on the last year of their deal. So whomever plays the best, if they get outbid, we could take the second best and re-sign them. I think it puts the 49ers in a great position, even going into the next offseason as well, because we have two guys that are already going to be in the system. And I'm a huge Stephon Gilmore fan. I think Gilly Lock would be awesome. So I would definitely do it, but I just don't know. Obviously, I don't know if like getting rid of Jimmy at this point for nothing is something that it makes sense either. So I don't know.
So I think the main thing with this, right, is what you harped on, which is if the team is getting rid of Jimmy Garoppolo before week 1 of the season, this is totally an option. This is totally within the realm of possibility because I was looking it up and I believe Stephon Gilmore's cap hit this year would be $8
million. I think
no. So that's his base salary. But
oh, okay.
You're going to be trading for him with the prorated bonus. It's going to be $16 million altogether for the 1-year deal. And I think the thing with Stephon Gilmore is even if you were to sign him and it were to be a 1-year rental, I believe they would be in the same situation. Yeah, I think they would. Where with a few years ago with Emmanuel Sanders, to where even though they traded picks for Emmanuel Sanders because he was a 10th-year veteran.
They'll get a compensatory.
Exactly. So I believe it's the same situation with Stephon Gilmore where he's just reached that part of his time in the NFL to where if the 49ers lose him in free agency, they would be able to recoup some of the draft capital that they lost out on giving up that for him. So they would figure something out. I think the interesting thing with Stephon Gilmore is that, like you said, with him, with Jason Verrett, you would be guaranteeing yourself one of those guys in the future, hopefully. Now, they're both on 1-year deals, but the idea is that you would have your choice of the two, right? And then even if you do really love both of them, you could even bring both of them back, and that would be an excellent secondary. I mean, really, especially with some of the young guys, like you said, that we've already brought in. So
Ambry,
of course. But I think with Stephon Gilmore, I would be really excited for this team to go and get a guy like this. I just don't think they can be set at the corner position. And I think they should, if they are going to be making a trade for any spot on this team, it shouldn't be wide receiver 3 in my mind. It shouldn't be another defensive lineman. It should be this next cornerback spot because like I've mentioned so many times, they just get one injury. They're down to guys that they probably don't want to start just yet. Even if you're very optimistic with them, the team probably doesn't want to put those rookies in that kind of a position. So if you're able to bring on a Stephon Gilmore, it's like an extra layer of insurance for this team that at their weakest spot already. So I would be really excited because I think if we got both of those guys playing in the same secondary with the safeties we have, with the front seven we have, that could be one of the best defenses in the league if they're all healthy.
I think either way, it's going to be one of the best defenses in the league. But I agree with you.
That's fair.
Gilmore would actually make it, obviously much, much better.
I think it would make them a legit top of the top defense. And for the 49ers, if they are going to be offloading Jimmy Garoppolo this year, I don't think they should do everything to win now necessarily, because I don't know if this is the year for them to win the Super Bowl. But if they can add veterans who will be on the team in the future, who they can re-sign, who they can get into this system already, and if it's before the trade deadline or anything, heck yeah, they should do it, because I want to build an awesome team around Trey Lance. And the beauty of the rookie contract is that you can go and sign all these veterans you want to be able to sign. You can extend whoever you want to extend. I mean, really, there isn't many limits to you financially when you have your rookie or your quarterback, your starting quarterback on the rookie wage scale. So, yeah, you could go and trade for a guy like Stephon Gilmore. I think the only part where this gets dicey is Gilmore is a free agent next year. So I think if he does want top of the top cornerback money, I would hesitate a little bit because I wouldn't want to give that to an older corner, given what our corner room already looks like, right? If it was a younger guy, let's say J.C. Jackson, someone who's under the age of 30, I mean, I'd be really interested in signing them long term. But if we can get Stephon Gilmore at a somewhat smaller rate than we would expect him to get, $12, $13 million, where he's not earning 16, 17, 18 million, that could be really awesome for the 49ers, because that means they could go and keep him and Jason Verrett. And I think that would be one of the best secondaries in the NFL.
For sure. But Ben, I hate to cut this short, but I got to jump on to Hammer and Nails right now as well. So I appreciate you having me on, man. Great conversation.
Hey, everyone go check out all of Sunil's stuff. It's all linked in the description below. Sunil, thank you so much, my man. I'm glad we got to cover everything.
For sure.
If you want to do this again, you let me know. Everybody, make sure you go check out all of the stuff Sunil's been putting out. And have a great Thursday night, everybody.
Appreciate it, man. Appreciate it. Talk to you